Finance Committee for Wednesday, July 24th will come to order. Let's see. Finance Committee for Wednesday, July 24th will come to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Legess? Mr. Washington?
Present.
Mr. Olthoff?
Present.
Mr. Hess? Mr. Byrne? Ms. Weber?
Present.
Mr. Payton?
Present.
Ms. Parker?
Present.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Present.
Mr. Zenz? Ms. Haas?
Present.
Mr. Swanson?
Present.
Ms. DiColo? Mr. Dennell?
Present.
Mr. Seroy?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I've had no requests for public comment. Are there any public comments? Or any requests for public comment? Hearing none, we have no presentations. You've received the June 26th minutes. Is a motion for Mr. Olthoff to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Payton, all in favor of approving the minutes for June 26th, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Could we have a motion to amend the agenda and schedule the Sheriff's Department with Sheriff Downey first? Mr. Jess moved. Mr. Olthoff seconds. All in favor of aye. Say aye. Opposed, nay. Sheriff, you want to come up first? Good morning.
Good morning.
And what do you have for us?
Thank you to all the other department heads who allowed this to happen. I have an appointment at 9:30, so I figured, and I don't have a whole lot. I will tell you that our local numbers have continued to rise, which is concerning on one hand and not so concerning on the other hand, because that means that the people who are in jail, who need to be in jail, are in jail. So that's a good thing locally. So with that said, at this point, it has not affected our out-of-county numbers, although our marshals numbers have increased to over 200 now, which is where we thought we would be at some point. Our ICE numbers have stayed relatively the same from month to month. So any increase that you see in numbers is really based on our local number and our ICE number, or I'm sorry, our federal marshal number. So one of the things that you may notice at the next, when you get the next financial report, and Steve, I know will notice this, we have 13 correctional officers right now off on either medical and or military. We have, I believe, 2 or 3 that have been deployed, serving our country. So those individuals will be out for a while. And with the military, when they come back, there is, call it what you will, some sort of reentry back to civilian life. So we don't know time. We don't know length of time that they'll be gone, but we do have 3 that are deployed. I did pass on to the Criminal Justice Committee about our vehicles, and we did get from Steve our numbers and where we're at with our leases from our existing vehicles. And what we want to try to do is try to get one of those leases paid off so that when we change out our 2013 vehicles, that lease just goes right into another lease, so we're not paying double. We're just going from lease to lease. So it's similar money, but we don't want to double the expense, if you will. So, and we are looking at a couple corrections vehicles too. One of the things that has helped us is our last group of vehicles from patrol. We actually utilized 2 of the Tahoes for corrections and just keep them in town. So that obviously eases the miles on our vans. If we're taking one person somewhere, whether it's the hospital, a doctor's appointment, it's a lot more economical to take one person in a Tahoe than to take one person in a 15-passenger van. So they are doing a great job with that, and you know, trying to get the most out of the vehicles that we have. So one thing that, you know, we've talked about before, and I know there's been rumors about our, as we call it, the shell at the jail. It's affectionately known as the shell, but it's really what we consider phase 3, our empty 32,000 square feet. We have had a couple of inquiries, verbally, nothing in writing, nothing official, but we have had inquiries from other entities besides ICE. So ICE has, although they have inquired periodically, we are getting some other inquiries into that building. As I've told this committee before, I would much rather have some other entity pay for it, because I don't want to run that risk with the county and say, let's spend $20 million, and then 2 years from now it dries up, and then we're on the hook for that $20 million. Obviously, it would be beneficial for us if one of those federal agencies would help pay for it, and that's what we are continuing to work towards. But it is not, those inquiries are not coming from ICE, they are coming from other entities. So, and the last thing I have, I don't know if those of you that are on the internet, I know you can't believe everything you read on the internet, but one thing you can believe is that today is Speed Awareness Day. And I know the state police are out because I took Interstate 57 on the way to work this morning, and I can tell you that I went 69 miles an hour on the interstate. The speed limit's 70, I went 69. But they are out because I saw 2 of them with people pulled over. So we have, our guys are out today. All of our administrators are working the road today, and our deputies who were assigned to the road are doing the speed awareness. We already had one this morning. We had a 90 and a 55 this morning. Did they get you, Mr. Olthoff? No. Oh, okay. Technically, you're not allowed any over, but it's just a little bit of discretion that that our guys utilize. So I wouldn't recommend to anybody today to go over. Non-speed awareness days, that's up to you. And that's all I have.
Are there any questions from the committee? If there are no questions, thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you again for allowing me to go first.
We'll move to the Finance Department. Mr. McCarty. You have a number of the documents in your packet. You can begin to review those. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We have the regular monthly reports for you in the packet. For the most part, as far as tax distributions that we receive, all of them except for sales tax have been on the rise. Sales taxes, I don't know, kind of been holding its own. We're watching it. A lot of the fluctuation is coming in the county-wide, I'm sorry, yeah, the county sales tax area. So that, that's the page behind the total sales tax page, broken down. That, as you can see, if you look at the historical of that column in the past, that it kind of, the monthly trend changes. So we'll watch that closely here. So it's kind of hard to say if there's something going on there or not because of the variation that we experience year to year from month to month. So so we'll keep an eye on it as we go. Sheriff just talked about the bed rental program. So some nice increases going on with some of the other ones, income tax, the PPRT area, use tax continues to accelerate. So a lot of other positive things going on there trend-wise. So I won't spend a lot more time on it unless anybody's got any questions.
Are there questions about the financial reports? Mr. Althoff.
Just, thank you, Chairman. Just curious, I don't know, I probably should address this to Mark, but does the increase in gas tax help us at all?
Not the general fund. It probably does with highway. I think he's shaking his head, but yeah, that would be something for Mark.
You'd have to use mic 18. Visitor mic.
Yes, we did get an increase in motor fuel tax, not really what TFIC and the IAC was hoping for, but we won't know those numbers specifically because they just started collecting it July 1st. So we won't see our first installment of that until August. So I'm going to kind of present something at the next Highway and Buildings Committee to kind of show what that motor fuel tax would mean to us.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to cash flow, please.
Yeah, on the cash flow report, just a couple of items just to discuss. The first TAW payment is finished. Did that in early July. We have scheduled to begin highway payback, but we're working on that right now. Our distribution just hit the books yesterday, so we'll work, and we've got a schedule with Mark here to discuss beginning that. So we're still in July here, so we'll work on that. The other area I wanted to bring up, if you see the July inmate bed rental under inflows, that July is higher than June. That's not a fluctuation from month to month in the actual activity, as the previous report, shows consistency. That's a timing of payment. So what happens is one payment may jump and cross the month and end up with with the other billing. So that's why you might see some fluctuation along the way. There is just billing, or the when we actually receive it and what month it comes in as. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because that can fluctuate. Yeah, other than that, pretty straightforward. Everything's going well, and we've updated the our current fiscal year, and we're still on pace for what we discussed in May as far as the general fund going positive. So everything's going well. This is just more of a timing of for cash flow purposes. So if there's any specific questions.
Are there questions on cash flow, Mr. Chess?
When will we know for sure if we're not going to need a TAW for this year or next year?
Yeah, probably, the time, probably November, December area. So we usually, if we do take it, we've been taking it in February area. So we'll take a look during that time. Chairman Wheeler and I have had discussion about potentially setting it up and then deciding whether to take it or not. Which we did that with First American Bank this year when we had the federal, when the Fed shut down, and we were trying to figure out how much, the timing of that. So we'll probably look at that and make a decision around December area or before we go forward. So we'll see where we're at that point in the flow at that point.
Thank you.
Any other questions in regard to cash flow? Hearing none, we'll move on. Do you have any specific claims recommended for?
I do not have anything on the claims side. And
right.
then the cyber security policy renewal, it's more of an FYI for the committee. There's nothing in your packet. This currently has been a 8/1 to 7/31 policy. And now there's discussion with the insurance company to move it to match up with our current insurance of 12/1 to 11/30. So the insurance company is working on that. So we'll probably have a prorated policy renewal from August 1st through November 30th here to get us through a few months. So probably roughly around $2,000. And then what we were informed for the annual change, it was $6,100 for the annual last year, and then it'll be just over 7,000 for the renewal. It's budgeted in our tort fund, so this is an FYI of our cybersecurity policy renewal. And once we get some information, yeah, we can share that with you. But right now, they're working on it. We don't have anything to distribute to you other than the conversation. So,
Any questions on that? If there are no questions, anything else you want to ask Mr. McCarty? Hearing nothing, thank you.
if I could just update what we're working on real quick. For August, we're working on the FY19 budget. Any budget amendments, we'll bring that for next month. And then we've started conversation for the FY20 budget process with everyone. And we're also working on the next tax levy request for next year already. So putting all that together, so we'll have more information for you here to go over in the next few months. So that's all I have.
Nothing else. We'll move forward. Administration Department, Ms. Beckman. You have the document from SKDO in your packet. You can review that. And we'll get a summary from Anita. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Just real quick, you have the report in your packet. It is from SKDO. This was additional agreed upon procedures that we entered into maybe November, December timeframe for them to do a review of our Chase credit cards. There were issues last fall with interest charges and application of payments, et cetera. There were a lot of questions. So the board contracted with SKDO to look at that process, to determine what happened, and that's what this report is doing. So essentially, it's really three different things that went wrong. There were some issues with application because everything was getting, all 4 accounts were paid on one check. So that's been corrected, and it was corrected before the issues occurred last fall. So that's taken care of. There were issues, and the timing is in the report with what got paid. The amount on the statement was not the amount being remitted, and that was a problem over time, and that incurred some of that interest. And then lastly, when they didn't match up, there were issues with how timely and what was communicated to Chase to try and get that fixed. So I will say that what I spoke to Andy about, and I met with Marcy at SKDO late last week. I received this last Friday afternoon. I met with her, kind of talked through it all with her and her thoughts, and we both kind of talked through maybe additional internal controls, which is what we wanted. The point of this is not to point fingers. The point is to determine where did we have internal controls not sufficient that allowed mistakes to happen, and how do we address those? So I talked to Andy on Friday, some initial thoughts. Marcy and I talked through some initial thoughts, other checks and balances that we would put in place and make sure that we safeguard that this doesn't recur, extra review of those, sign-offs, actual roll forward on the claim form that shows what the last statement balance was, what the additional new charges are, less payments to an ending balance. So you're constantly looking and making sure that you've got that roll forward of the statement balance so that you don't get into a situation where we incur these interest charges. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to.
Mr. Altoff.
Thank you, Chairman. Shouldn't be a policy that we pay these off, and if there's a discrepancy as to whether it's warranted or not, that we do that after the fact rather than before?
Correct. And that's part of what we want to put in our policy, is not only that, but then who's responsible for that documentation? You know, there was, SKDO did indicate there was communication to Chase that the balances were wrong, but not sufficient support. So you want to make sure that you're holding somebody accountable, that they're responsible for the appropriate documentation that gets, and communication that gets sent to Chase so it gets corrected.
Follow up, please. Did we get any relief from Chase on the interest?
Not on this $2,300, no. We did actually, we, by oversight, late paid last month's, and when the statement came into the chairman last month and there was interest on it, we called that day, and they just immediately removed it. And I verified with Steve this morning, the credit did come through to take that interest off. But it requires immediate follow-up, immediate documentation. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of that.
Thank you.
Mr. Kisner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I read this letter from Smith, Killing, and Dykstra, and it's above my pay grade, but your explanation helped. But one of the things I did read is after September 26, 2018, the Finance Office determined the payments to be made on each payment. Do I interpret that to say that after the September 2018, the Finance Department is now making certain that this gets paid until you get these procedures in place and we no longer have this problem?
Steve, you want to talk to your part of this? How the process currently works.
Yeah, the current, is this, my voice carries a lot. The current process was that the auditor's office was reviewing them and creating a claim for payment. And then we had some issues with the way the checks were being applied and stuff with Chase, and as we started looking into that on the check side, is when a lot of this was exposed as far as interest and late payments and different things. So we did make a phone call and went all the way back, date range wise. I think we were able to go back through April of 2018 and get all that reversed out. And so we've also been a double check and kept an eye on it, as well as what the auditor's office is doing. So it's something that, you know, we were not aware of until it was made aware of to us, and then we jumped in and helped and got a lot of it taken care of as much as we could anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions in regard to this? If not, do you have any more? All right,
Nope.
thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the treasurer's report. Mr. Africano? You have a copy. Monthly report is in your packet in parts, so. I'm sorry. So we'll need a motion to approve. Ms. Parker, is there a second? Mr. Jess? All in favor of approving the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Good morning, everyone. Ron, good morning. I guess the first thing on the agenda would be that we made our first distribution on Friday. About 85 million went out. We typically distribute about 80% of the money that we have on hand, the first distribution. That way we sort of smooth out some of the peaks and valleys of the distribution throughout the 6 distributions. It allows us to keep some money in the bank too, and right now we're earning 2.42%. So we had about 105 million in the bank for near a month at that rate. Second thing is mobile home bills went out on Friday, so they have been received. And this year is the first year ever that you can pay your mobile home bill online. So we've had a lot of calls regarding that. So we're happy about that. Make it easier. And you can also print a duplicate bill without a duplicate bill fee online. You could do that for real estate this year as well, and use it to pay at the banks. that really is all I have, except to say that September 5th is the due date for second installment. And I apologize, I think the due date for mobile homes is around the 18th or 19th of September. It's on the website. With that, I would take any questions. Ron, Mr. Kinzinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is not a question, it's a comment.
Okay.
As a taxpayer, I certainly appreciate your money management skills and how you're attempting to earn money on assets that have been collected. I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you. It's just an adjustment for some of the taxing districts, because some have been used to getting, for the last 5-6 years, there's been really, maybe even longer, there's been no interest to gain. And so as soon as the money came in, it was distributed. And then so people recalibrated their budgets and were looking for that money as soon as it was brought in to be handed over to them. So we've tried to help the taxing bodies adjust to the new schedule, but it will be between July 10th and July 20th, as long as I'm the treasurer and as long as there is interest to be earned. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Lichess?
Nick, any interest earned has to be shared with all the taxing
But
bodies.
yeah, it's shared proportionally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Anything more? If not, thank you. All right, the auditor's office. I don't see any, Mr. Lee or anyone from his office here. We did have in his report some generic references to some items that need to be acted on. I assume that that's being done within the office, and so if you have questions about that when he attends next month, why we can verify that those issues that he mentioned in his report in a generic form have been dealt with specifically within his office. Is there a motion to approve the monthly claims? Ms. Parker? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curious why our auditor is not here today for this report?
I can't answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, a motion to approve the claims report? Mr. Altoff? Mr. Swanson seconds. This will be a roll call vote.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Lejes? Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Oltoff? Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Ms. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell? Mr. Seroy?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. There's nothing else in terms of the auditor's office. We'll move to other business. And intergovernmental agreement between the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and the County of Kankakee. Mr. Skinhorn, you could come up, please. Fill us in on the details here.
Can you switch over, Kel?
All right. A little over a year ago, we were approached by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. They wanted to let us know that they had a program available that would allow us to buy out and demolish severe flood damaged properties, and that we had some properties that would be eligible for that program. So last July, we took the program to PZA to get their permission to apply for the money, and they granted that. And the money was approved by DNR. You have it in your packet is a copy of the contract. I think it's up to, they will reimburse us for up to $507,000 to buy out. We had 5 houses which are listed in there, but one of them has been sold to a private party. We'll still approach them to see if they want to sell it to us, but if not, it'll be 4 houses. This is not a grant program. It will pay 100% of the cost to buy the property, demolish the property, and restore the site back to its original condition. But it is a reimbursement. The county must spend the money first and get reimbursed on it. Now, past experience, we just did one house. It was not through this program, but we did get the check from the state, the Dahl property over on River Lane in Aroma Park, and we did get reimbursed. It was about 30 to 40 days after we submitted the bills. So it's not, we're not waiting a long time for the money. And we have every indication that it would be similar in this case. And we do not have to do them all at once. Talking with DNR, we could buy out one house, tear it down, then go on to the next house, so that we're not putting out $400,000, $500,000 all at one time.
Let's see, which one is that, 15, Mr. Searoy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Skimmerhorn, do we have to let a bid for the demolishing of these properties? So would we have
do.
So, I mean, just makes sense if we could do them all at the same time, then you're not letting one, demolishing, letting another one, demolishing, you know what I mean? I think we might save money in the long run if we have to put the money up front. Just guessing.
If we do them all at once, there is likely some cost savings.
Yeah. But I don't know if we can afford to do them all at once. That's the...
If you let all of the demolitions at once, they've already got their crew there, their equipment on site, so there's probably some cost savings involved. But if you're not comfortable with risking that much at one time, we can do them individually.
Okay.
Okay. The properties in question, are outlined up there, and their addresses are on the screen up there. They're all at the end of Laurel Lane. 3 of them are severe repetitive loss properties. They've been vacant since the 2015 flood. One of them has a large tree sitting in its living room that has fallen over.
And that whole area takes water a lot.
Yes. And one of them is not a severe repetitive loss, but there are times of the year you have to take a boat to get to it. So DNR wanted to, allowed us to include that one. The one on the west side of the street is the one that sold. It was a foreclosure. Wells Fargo Bank was going to give it to us, but we couldn't accept it until we had this agreement signed, and they, by law, had to keep it up for sale, and somebody bought it. So we'll see what they're going to do with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at this funding thing, it looks like we have until June 30th, 2021 to expend the money. And I would think with the talent that we have in your office as well as the legal office, that we can get options on property, that we can bid 2 houses at a time and not risk $500,000 with the present state of Illinois, and in it this is a different program. So I would suggest that we structure something that maybe cuts our risk in half, but it still controls all those properties and would not cost us a lot of money if in the process of getting a bid for tear down, it's included in the specifications for tear down.
And let's keep in mind too that if you look at the screen up there, we've got an estimated total cost right now of about $432,000. Even though the grant, or not, excuse me, it's not a grant, but the program will reimburse us for up to $507,000. Those are estimates based on the fair market value from the assessment office and estimated cost for demolition. Now we know we estimated $30,000 for demolition. The last one we did was $24,000, so it's likely going to be cheaper. If we accept the agreement, first thing we do is have an appraisal done on each property. Well, first thing we do is go back to the owners and make sure they're still wanting to sell. Then we have an appraisal done. And that appraisal is going to determine what the cost is, minus any floodplain payments that they've received. And since 3 of them are severe repetitive loss, you may have a $80,000 house that's received $60,000 worth of payments. So our offer on the house is going to be $20,000. But we don't know that yet, so we have to go with the maximum amount from the fair market value.
Thank you again. I've just had experience with appraisers, and I recommend that we get at least 2 appraisers, because they're all over the board.
We actually have to follow the state's protocol for
many
the
do they have?
appraisals. They
3?
have to be, yeah, we can't just hire any appraiser. They have to be appraisers that do floodplain work because the appraisal has to be pre-damaged. The value of the house before there was any damage.
How many do they require?
Just one as far as I know.
I would like to see the county look at least 2. I don't know what the cost is, but I think it's be well worth the money.
So the offer price on the house will be the appraised price minus any payouts that they've had. So it will be, in most cases, far less than what the numbers you're seeing there. We just don't know what those exact numbers will be.
Mr. Kinzer, do you want to make that in the form of a motion?
I personally would like to see at least 2 appraisers on each property, or those 4 properties. And I would like to see this procedure pursued, mitigating the risk to the county, working with Mr. Skimmerhorn and the legal department to structure this so that maybe we don't have more than $250,000 at risk at any one time.
I'm going to take that as a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Parker? Mr. Skinner, do you want to make any comments on that motion?
Just like to say, I will check with the program to see if we can have 2 appraisals. I know they'll reimburse us for 1. I'm not sure they'll reimburse us for the second one. So, yeah, we're talking about $400 or $500 for an appraisal, so it's not, yeah.
Is there discussion on the motion? Now, do I understand the motion recommending them do 2 at a time?
No, I'm recommending that we not put the county at risk for more than $250,000 at a time, and that we structure a deal so we can do all of it.
Okay, I want to be clear on the motion, so that, planning have any comments on that?
No, we're okay with that. The only question is, can we do 2 appraisals and will they reimburse us for it? We also are going to need a motion to authorize Mr. Wheeler to sign the agreement. Okay.
I don't know if we need to do those in a particular order. I don't think it would be necessary.
No, but the signing of the agreement does need to be a roll call vote because there's money involved.
Be a roll call vote, yeah. Are there questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing no questions, I think that's simply a recommendation that doesn't directly involve spending money, so I'll take it as a voice vote. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries then. We need a motion to approve the contract. Mr. Altoff, Ms. Haas, seconds. Is there discussion on approving the contract? I see no discussion. We'll have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Legess? Aye. Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Olthoff?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Ms. Haas? Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell? Mr. Seroy?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Do you have anything more?
Oh, that's it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Is there any old business to come before the committee? Is there any new business to come before the committee? If not, Mr. Jess, motion to adjourn. Mr. Altoff, seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.